Hello, sword people. Welcome to the Sword Guy podcast. This is your host, Dr. Guy Windsor, consulting swordsman, teacher, and writer. Join me for interviews with historical martial arts instructors and experts from a wide range of related disciplines as we discuss swords, history, training, and bringing the joy of historical martial arts into our modern lives. I hope you enjoy this greatest hit episode of the show. You can find all the episodes at swordschool.com/podcast, and there's a direct link in the description to this episode's show notes. On with the show. It's normal when running this kind of podcast that you have a bit of sort of pre-interview chat. And as is often the case with people like Rory, the pre-interview chat got into places where I just had to share it with you. So instead of having a normal introduction where I go on about what a wonderful person the person I'm about to interview is, and then I start a formal interview, this kind of kicks off with he's literally just pouring coffee and talking about roosters, and then gets into some stuff that I had absolutely no idea we were going to be talking about. But I thought it was too good not to share. So without further ado, please welcome Rory Miller, and settle in for some roosters and catamarans, and you'll see.
All right, I'm pouring coffee, and there may be roosters.
Well, that just adds sort of depth and interest to the soundtrack, so that's great. Roosters are good.
Okay, good.
So how have you been? I mean, it's been ages.
It has been ages. I had my big adventure last year was sailing from South Africa to Florida.
You are kidding?
Yeah, first sailing trip was a transatlantic. So that
okay. I'm gonna have to put that into the interview because that's just too weird. South Africa.
Yeah. Well,
okay.
it's the joke is it's weird because you tell the story the same way every time. But it's like. You know the feeling when you find out that you have really rich friends, because I knew they were doing well. I didn't know that they were having a custom catamaran commissioned in South Africa well.
Okay.
And called me up and asked if I was interested in crewing it back with them. And it's like, how can you get an opportunity like that and say no? You'd be kicking yourself.
Yeah, you have to go.
Yeah, so flew to South Africa and got on a catamaran. First time on a catamaran. First time sailing. I went out for an afternoon sailing when I was a kid 30 years ago. 40 years ago now.
Wow.
And it was amazing. So, and then it came back just as the coronavirus hit. So
okay.
My state's been pretty much locked down, which is not that different than the way I live most of the time. I'm, a hermit up on my mountaintop, but no traveling teaching. I think I've taught 3 seminars this year.
Yeah. No, I haven't taught any, apart from online.
Yeah, I miss the travel.
Oh, God, me too.
Yeah.
I was teaching at an event in Portugal day before yesterday, but of course I was just in my study for 2 hours instead of actually being in Portugal, interacting with Portuguese people and drinking Portuguese wine. I was just in my study.
Yeah.
It wasn't the same at all.
Would lose. So where are you in the world now?
Me? I live in Ipswich in the UK.
Because last time I saw you, I think you were in Finland and you were thinking about moving, but I didn't know if you'd actually done it yet. I don't pay attention.
No. When we met in Holland or Belgium. Sorry. When we met in Belgium, I was still living in Finland. But by the time we had lunch in Seattle, I'd been moved to England for a year or two.
Okay, and I probably asked that at the time and just forgot it.
I do the same. It's like, because honestly, do you actually care where I live? Not unless you're visiting.
It's not a huge effect on my life, but
exactly. Yeah. So, it's funny because I normally start these interviews with the question like, "Where are you?" and then you just threw it at me. Hang on, who's interviewing here? Come on, Rory, behave.
Do you realize how many times in these interviews I've been tempted to turn into a counter interview just to practice?
Well, you're perfectly welcome to do so.
I'll be good.
Have fun.
I'll be good. It's hard not to practice.
Indeed. Well, that's exactly it. It's hard not to practice.
Yes.
Once you really sort of grok the whole thing.
Yeah. It's good word. And when you look at it right, and you're thinking right, everything is practice. It's like, every way you move is the way you move. It's, I was taking a walk with one of my hosts in Scotland, and I did not even realize I was doing it, because I'm walking on a handrail. I'm doing the little, you can hear me banging on the table now, but the little strike you do with the Shotai strike that you do with the little bone at the end of your wrist, I'm doing that on the handrails as we walk. And he goes, if I'm doing the math in my head right, you're getting about 6,000 reps a day and you don't even notice it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And like just walking upstairs.
Yeah.
Or getting through a door.
Mm-hmm.
Right. One of my favorites is, if you open a door, you have to turn the handle, you have to move the door, you have to get around the door, you have to close the door. Yeah. And if you do the whole thing properly, there's no resistance from the door, and you don't bang your face on the door, and you don't touch the door with your foot and whatever. And it is just so like some of the sort of getting control of the weapon, moving around the back and going for the neck or whatever. The footwork's the same. A lot of what you're doing with your hands is the same. And you get that same kind of real world feedback because the door doesn't know that it's supposed to be cooperative.
Yeah. And we do the same. It's one of the reasons I open doors for people is not necessarily that I'm polite, but if you open the door correctly, you get a 360-degree scan and no one notices you're doing it.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And actually, there are a few people in the world who, if we're in a restaurant, I am perfectly happy for them to take the chair facing the door or looking out into the room. And I will quite happily sit with my back to the room because I know that person is much better at checking out the environment than I am. And you are one of those people, Rory.
Oh, cool. And I almost never sit in that chair because if I was going to be a bad guy, that's the person I'd shoot first, just automatically.
I noticed that when we were in that restaurant in Seattle, eating Egyptian food, I believe. No, not Egyptian. It was Ethiopian food, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That was really good. But you were not sat in the paranoid place.
Yeah. It's if you're with someone you trust, you don't have to because they'll tell you everything that's going on. But even if you're with a stranger, if there's something going on, their face will change. You'll know. You don't need to see everything yourself. And I try to really push this with the tactical jerks is anything that you think that you're doing because it's tactical. If you can do it and be invisible, it's 10 times better. I don't want, if I'm really paranoid, it's my wife. We went back to an environment that the running joke had been, I can't go back there until more people have died.
Right.
But after 30 years, we did go back, and my wife was, she said, I did not like your personality change. I do not like the person you are when you're there. Mm-hmm. And I didn't notice it until I just habitually, I hadn't done this for years, threw my sunglasses on the table upside down so I could use them for a mirror to see what was behind me.
Right.
So. Yeah,
that's not the kind of place you really want to spend much time if you can avoid it.
No, and it was, it was fun at the time, but I was a 22-year-old. I was a 22-year-old.
Right. Yes. Yeah. The idiot part can just be left out. It's understood.
Yeah.
Well, you brought up your wife, and the first thing I ever heard about your wife was in the back of Meditations on Violence. She says that it's easy to understand Rory if you work from the assumption that he was raised by coyotes.
Yes.
Now, I think I might have a very slight inkling as to what she's talking about, but would you care to expand on that a bit?
I guess it's I was raised in the desert in Eastern Oregon. It's not a Gobi desert. It's like a cowboy desert with the tumbleweeds and the sagebrush. And right. It was the 70s, so everyone knew the world was going to end any minute. And my parents bought into that, and so they got 80 acres, and we spent the time basically homesteading. Build our house, I had contractors work on a lot of it, but build our house, no running water, no electricity, grew our food, hunted. So that the really formative, early adolescent years, I was almost completely alone. We did have a school. We went to school, but I was not peopling well. I was barely, I was pretty feral. Let's put it that way. And I think I learned more. There's one of the stories I told her, coyotes were a problem in the sense that they'd kill baby calves and they would kill, sheep. And so every so often the local ranchers would get together and they'd hire someone with a helicopter and someone else with a rifle. And the helicopter would go shoot the coyotes. And I was spending a lot of time, just a lot of that adolescent energy. So I would go out at night and I would just run through the desert in the moonlight. I would spend hours at night just trying to burn off energy. And I would listen. And if you listened, you'd hear the high-pitched yipping and howling from the coyotes and the deeper pitched. And it turned out that what appeared to be going on was that the male coyotes were leading the helicopters away from the dens.
Oh, wow.
So almost everyone they killed was a male, and they were deliberately staying away from their families to keep them safe. And it was like that, I think, taught me more about parenting and what a man's job is than anything I ever learned from humans up to that point. So I told her that story, and she started saying that it's easier to understand me if you figure out that I was raised by the coyotes. I wasn't raised by people.
That makes sense. Yeah, and it's sort of the tragedy of being a bloke in a kind of standard, gender normative culture is, I know perfectly well that if something bad happens at my house, it's my job to slow things down so my wife can get the kids out the back. It's just sort of baked in somehow.
Well, until we had 7 billion people, it made sense. Men are expendable genetically. Women are far less expendable.
Yeah. So, okay, we seem to have accidentally started the interview without me actually doing the usual intro stuff, but that's fine. I'll add that in later. And from you mentioned your sailing trip, and that's not something I was expecting to talk to you about today, but I can't resist. So you've never sailed before, and you're on a catamaran going from South Africa to the States.
Yeah.
And
Fort Lauderdale. Yeah.
That must have been sort of a very immersive learning experience.
It was amazing because it was brand new to me. I had no clue what I was doing. It's like I still don't know the names of all the ropes and parts. It was a maiden voyage, so the number of things that broke down was shocking. We ended up
it's the shakedown voyage, right?
Oh yeah, we ended up spending a week in St. Helena, hoping a part would come in before we gave up and just went without it. And St. Helena is one of the most remote places in the world. It is amazing. It's this little British colony in the middle of the Atlantic. Just beautiful, tiny, the most diverse ecosystems I've ever seen on a place that small. Sailing itself, I mean, there were colors of blue that I had never imagined. The phosphorescence. I'd seen phosphorescence in the wake in the Caribbean before, but never the little flashes of sparkles. I had not seen those before. I'd never seen waves crash and have the outline look like a glowing green foam horse. It was epic and magical. One of the things I'm using or teaching now is an exercise, because I realized I used to do it. There's a lot of things that you did, and then you never realize you're doing them because they were so natural. But one of the things within any situational awareness class, they'll tell you to set a baseline and look for any deviations from the baseline, but they almost never tell you how to set the baseline. And so one of the first things, Night Watch is sitting there and just really, really listening and realizing that every single sound means something. And as, you know, and I would try to figure out, what does this sound mean? And that tunes you into what's going on. And we forget that everything means something. Doesn't mean it's important, but anything that touches your senses came from something. And so that was incredible. And yeah, we had some rough water. We set a speed record for that style of catamaran. It was just a super great trip.
How many were you on the boat?
3.
Okay. So I guess you knew each other really well by the end.
By the end of it, we knew each other pretty good.
So you sailed to Fort Lauderdale and then made your way home to somewhere in Oregon. Is that correct?
I say Oregon because several people have heard of Portland, Oregon, but no one's heard of the little town I live in. So I'm 25 miles from Portland, but I'm actually in Washington State.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. I have a friend similarly in a kind of liminal space between Oregon and Washington, closer to Portland, but still in Washington. So I understand you live sort of out in the country with goats.
Yeah. If this was a video interview, I would take the computer outside now and show you the view, because it's all green trees. The sun's coming out. We're on a slope facing south, and it's just really gorgeous right now. We have a very heavy frost on the deck. Yeah.
That's beautiful. So you chose the place because it's beautiful and convenient, or what brought you there?
I chose the place. The big killer at the time, I was working the jail, and it was, you know, urban. It was, anyway, I wanted a place where I could go and not think about that. And the thing that actually sold us on this was the deck, because this is the perfect cigar and whiskey deck.
Do you know, I actually have an exercise called Whiskey and Cigars.
An outdoor
what
exercise.
You do is, you sit on the floor and your legs are up and you pretend you're in a leather armchair with a whiskey in one hand and a cigar in the other. And of course, keeping your legs up, resting on an imaginary silken footstool, you reach behind you for more whiskey and you reach behind you for more cigars. And you just kind of, leading a class through this, you can just relax into it. Once you know the trick of it, you relax into it, and it's not actually very strenuous. But until you know the trick of it, it's really hard. So you get to kind of sit there and just have this relaxed, amusing conversation, mostly with yourself, and the class is kind of like sweating and squealing, and it's super fun. But yes, whiskey and cigars are, they're so important. They're baked into my very training curriculum.
Yeah, nice static V up.
Exactly. And of course, there are variations where you tie an imaginary rope around your legs and you throw it over a pulley to pull your legs up higher. And yeah, it's super fun. Because visualization is everything, right?
Yeah, visualization. Weirdly, I don't know if we want to go down this rabbit hole. I can't visualize the way I used to.
Okay.
Because I used to practice the visualization, you know, trying to get the look on the guy's face, you know, the scars, the smell. I would try to get every single detail. And now when I visualize a problem, it just comes to me as vectors. It's very abstract, but there's no, it's just energy moving in directions. And that's what I'm doing for visualization now. I don't know exactly when it changed. Because I used to be heavily into visualization and guided meditation, and it just So
what you were visualizing? What, an assailant?
In what?
You were visualizing an assailant, or
usually, or you know, problem solving. You know, if this happened, what would I do? So I'd try to imagine the situation as accurately as possible. But now it's just energy and vectors.
Okay. Well, yeah, that's more generally applicable.
I think it's just weird.
Okay. Maybe you just got to a certain point where the specifics don't really matter anymore.
I think that is part of it, because a lot of the specifics don't. I mean, the first several times, the smell and the sounds and the details are part of the the things that build up fear. And once you get a little bit more past that, they become less relevant. You realize the fear is actually the shiny thing coming at your stomach. I don't give a shit if the guy has rotten teeth or not.
Right. Okay, so you're in Oregon on this lovely farm, and you started out in the wilds being raised by coyotes. So what happened in between? How did you get from one to the other?
I heard Roseville karate, then I'm sure that's not what you said. How did I get from where to here?
From one to the other. Yeah, from coyotes in the wilderness to living in Oregon. And I know you have a background in corrections and that sort of thing, but
I went to college.
Okay.
So I graduated when I was 16. I turned 17 that summer and started college. I thought I was going to be either a spy or a marine biologist, which is kind of typical for a 17-year-old.
Yeah.
Stayed in college as long as I could afford it. And then when I couldn't, I would drop out and go get a job for a year, or however long it took to get enough money to go back. During that time, I joined the National Guard. I met my wife. We're still together after, 86, 2020, 34 years. Or 40.
She's a very patient woman, sir.
She is, that is the sterling quality of the ability to put up with us. And I'm just assuming that you chose as wisely as I did, so she has the same story.
Well, I'm only at 14 years and counting, but yes, there's no plans to change.
Yeah. So, the corrections thing was during the Kuwaiti War. I was in the National Guard. We were a desert trained anti-tank unit. I was a medic. And Cammie and I decided to get married because if anything bad happened to me, there would be no benefits. And then we didn't get activated. The first airstrike wiped out all his tanks, which is what we specialized in killing. And suddenly it's like, oh my God, I'm married. I need a real job. And so the corrections was the first job that came through.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so you went and trained as a prison guard, or?
I was I got hired as a corrections deputy. So in our system, we have a difference between jail and prison. So jail would be what you call remand. So we get everyone fresh off the streets right after they're booked. And that's where the actual most of the fighting experience comes in is right after the arrest, because they're pissed off, they're angry, they still have drugs in their system if they do, they're still drunk if they do, they're angry at the police, but the police had guns. And so the first person in uniform they're going to see when the handcuffs come off are two unarmed corrections deputies. And that's why so much experience concentrates in booking. However big your city is, the two guys working booking have about as much experience in hand-to-hand force instance as your entire patrol district combined.
Wow.
Yeah. So I've sat in teaching one class with a friend, and we two were corrections, and we were teaching an enforcement team, and they had 120 years of experience between them, and each of us alone had more uses of force than all of them combined.
Wow. Okay. So that's where you picked up your sort of emphasis on unarmed self-defense against various attacks.
Well, that's where I got the perspective. Yeah.
Right. Okay. But I know you've also trained martial arts.
Yes.
So I'm assuming that you're known as like the self-defense guy. I don't think that's a fair characterization, but that's what everybody who I've met and mentioned you to, that's how they kind of pigeonhole you in their heads.
Yeah.
And one of the things I'd actually like to do with this interview is broaden out that pigeonhole by several orders of magnitude. But so you were working as a corrections officer, training martial arts on the side?
Well, I trained as soon as I got to college. Where I lived was too small. There were no martial arts within 100 miles. Mm-hmm. So as soon as I got to college, and it wasn't, I needed to get my temper under control, and I'd heard that was a great way to do it. And again, this was just at the start of the 80s. So martial arts were coming up as the way to become a complete human being. So I signed up. I didn't even know that there was much of a difference between the different types of martial arts. And I happened to luck into judo, and the coaches at the Oregon State team at the time were a former West German Olympic team member and a former junior national champion in the U.S. So I lucked out into two extraordinary coaches.
That is pretty damn lucky.
It was incredibly lucky because I probably would have become addicted to anything I started in, like most people. But they set a bar for what was acceptable instruction, and it was the thing that I loved about judo. It is just physics and physical conditioning. There's no mysteries. There's no bullshit. There's no way to say that you're good. You're going to be on the mat and you're going to prove it every day. And I love that. I tried every other martial art I could find at the time, and I played with all of them. I dabbled, but judo was my first love. And like a lot of obsessive martial artists that get hooked, because 16, 17 seems to be the sweet spot for people getting addicted to martial arts. I was obsessive. I did it all. It was my biggest hobby. There was one class I had to take 3 times because the idiots kept scheduling at the same time as the judo.
Yeah, it's easy to say which one would win out.
Yeah. So I was going to, dropping into all the judo classes in the PE department in the morning, and then working out with the club and the team at night, and then taking every other martial art at the same time I could. So I wound up judo and fencing in college. And then when we moved up to Portland, because, looking for a job, and Cammie's dad was really sick, I was looking for another judo club, and I stumbled into a jiu-jitsu club, which was, again, extraordinary. I still think that Dave is probably the best fighter pound for pound I've ever met. And I've met some really good ones. And he was really, I want to say he was a really good teacher, but it turns out he was only a really good teacher for me. One of my friends who came up through the system, with me at one point, I go, he's the best teacher. I go, no, he's a terrible teacher. You're the only one that understands a thing he's saying.
Okay. You'd like to give an example of that?
I don't know if I can, because it all made perfect sense to me.
All right.
But
sure. Well, you see that, I sometimes find it completely baffling that some instructors have any students. But the students clearly seem to be getting what they're looking for out of someone who, to me, is speaking gibberish.
Yeah, and Dave wasn't speaking gibberish. He was just fun, and I think probably he was having so much fun that people had a hard time taking him seriously. It's my best guess.
Okay.
He was like a kitten playing with a ball of string every day. And someday you were the ball of string, and occasionally you got to be the kitten too.
Okay, so you were doing sort of classical jiu-jitsu, locks and throws and grappling and stuff?
Yes. Yeah,
I imagine it would be a bit difficult to translate that to corrections because you're not supposed to injure the inmates.
Especially the classical stuff doesn't have a lot of submissions. The whole point.
Right.
One of our sayings was that samurai do not roll around on the floor like children, but it actually comes from an environment where if you are that focused on one person, you're going to get stabbed in the back, because battlefield systems are very different than dueling systems. So for emergencies, it was excellent. For handcuffing, it sucked. And I wound up studying small circle jiu-jitsu, which I still think is the best thing I found for handcuffing. There's small joint specialists. And if you want to make a big guy voluntarily put his hand, well, not voluntarily is the wrong word, but put his hands behind his back with minimal injury, that's the best thing I found.
Small circle jiu-jitsu. I've not come across it. What's it about?
Wally J was a judo coach. He's one of those guys like Customato who's never championed himself, but he trained a shit ton of champions. And if you take a kumikata grip, you take a regular grip on a judo gi, one of the things he discovered was, it's a lot of the things you want to do, you want to get the guy up on his toes. That's where his balance is weakest. And it turns out instead of trying to lift or use any of the big muscle groups, if you just curl your little finger towards yourself, you can make bigger people come up on their toes. And he started working, and their symbol, and if you think about a grip on a Japanese sword, it's all that little finger.
Yep.
Right? It's that ringing action. So he started using that as his symbol idea. I don't know exactly who. He was the first person I've ever seen that actually laid out a list of principles. A lot of people talk about principles-based teaching, but you ask them what their principles are, they have no clue. They're just saying the word.
Yes.
And he had this pain makes believers. When he originally started Small Circle, he didn't want a system. He in classical jiu-jitsu, you can see this. There are no finger locks at this era because that one, or in the system, because that one comes from a place where they were wearing gauntlets. So no finger locks. And then you get to this system, is like it has a lot of finger locks because it was a rest and control after the Warring States period, and or Ages Country War, and then you lose them again when it gets into sport because no matter how good you are, if you got 200-pound guys grabbing fingers, something's going to break. Yeah. So he wanted to basically make a package that you could put into any martial art that you wanted and bring back the finger locks from your history. But it got so popular that people kind of insisted on him making a system. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have to look into that.
Wally J, he was also just this really super fun person. So.
Okay. So Small Circle Jiu-Jitsu. I'm making a note. I shall dig it out. The next time I see you, I shall make you dance on your toes there with a judiciously applied finger lock.
Well, have we done the lock flow drill and the finger dancing? I don't think we've done those.
No.
Yeah, because
I've not done those with you.
Yeah, because it's not a primary self-defense thing, so I tend not to do it at the self-defense-based seminars. It's more for professionals. But you can get actually really good at improvising locks under pressure very quickly if you play the right games.
Sure. Okay. Well, that I take that as a promise. Next time we meet, we shall have a...
Absolutely.
Show me that stuff. That would be fantastic.
Yeah.
Now, you've written a lot about and you brought this up earlier, the difference between what actually happens when you're applying things and what happens within a martial art. And your book, Meditations on Violence, is really all about how a martial art is adaptive for a particular context, and it may work in that context if you train it for that context, but it's not going to work somewhere else. Okay. So and you have a lot of experience of martial arts done in the dojo and actually dealing with seriously non-compliant people. So, sparring is the closest we get in many martial arts to a truly non-compliant opponent.
Yeah.
I've read pretty much everything you've written on this, but I'm guessing the listeners probably haven't read all of it. So would you like to just go into the role of sparring in martial arts and how it relates to the real world?
Okay. So I'm going to try to... Remember how you said that people peg me as a self-defense guy, not the martial arts guy?
Yep.
Okay, so I'm going to hit into this a little bit. The only reason why this is even a question is because people want their martial arts to also be combat and fighting and self-defense and dueling. They want it to be all of these things. If you're happy doing your martial art because it's fun, that should be reason enough. It's okay. And within that context, I think sparring is the most valuable part of martial arts because it's the most fun. When you're playing games, you ingrain movement patterns, you ingrain stuff way better than you'll ever ingrain it by trying to memorize it or figure out or take it too seriously. Having fun is essential to learning. Sparring is essential to learning. Sparring is essential to playing. Where it gets weird is where people try to extrapolate that to other things that are not as related as they want them to be. So one analogy I've been using lately is when you take high-end sparring, you take MMA or whatever, think of that as Formula One racing or rally racing. Self-defense is a lot more like four-wheeling with a shitty car with engine trouble. It's
okay.
Yeah, the skills. We want the skills to be the same, but they don't necessarily cross over. And one of those, if you're in the kind of shape that a professional fighter is in, what are the odds anyone's going to try to abduct you for a rape? It's right. It's a different problem applied to different people. So I love sparring. It is fun. But throwing it into the sword world, which is way more your world than mine. And by the way, my wife is reading your book right now, the one on sword combat for writers.
Oh, right.
And so she wanted me to tell you it is fucking amazing. So her word.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. So like with sword, battlefield sword is different than dueling sword.
Sure.
Right. It must be. There's no place in the world. And so that's also different than sword fighting for fun. And this is something that, again, she left the book out, so I was reading a passage out of it. But in your book, you point out that there are the two camps. One that say that sparring is super important. The other saying that sparring, unless they're dead bodies at the end, it's not real. You don't know if you're learning anything. And so to that extent, yeah, the even for dueling, sparring and dueling are super close related. Physical skills are the same. You've read Aldonati's book.
Yeah, of course.
Okay. And his thing where he's getting in that duel, his description of he doesn't call it adrenaline, but his description of that feeling that, oh my God, I've never done this for real. He's probably the best in the world.
He was certainly the best in the world.
And well, I don't know if he was at the time because that was fairly early in his career, but
I don't know. He was Olympic champion several times over, and but he bled first.
Right. So it's that doubt, right? And that's the thing. But the skills were almost exactly the same. But he had to get over that mental thing, and so dueling and sparring super close. But the one thing that's missing from sparring, and one of the reasons why I'm probably the only one in the world that likes the right of way rule, is because the right of way rule is there to force you to act like the fear is there.
What is the right of way rule?
That you cannot counterattack someone after you've defended if they initiate the attack.
Oh, sorry, right of way. Yeah, like in foil. Sorry, I misheard you. Thanks to the lovely internet.
Yeah, so I consider that to be and one of my tests for a fencing instructor is if they can't explain why the right of way rule makes it more realistic, not less realistic, then they don't understand what's going on.
Right.
It's because you only get one double kill in real life.
Right. Yeah. And in sports FA, if you one hit up and you can go for certain double hits, but it's risky to go for a single hit, then the sensible thing to do is just go for doubles until you've got the required number of hits. And so you win 5-4, but that's 9 bleeding wounds.
Yeah. And you've read Maya's books, right? Yeah, Liar, Cheat, and the Thief and The Hustler. And that's what it's all about. That was because between fencing and Japanese systems, she had to beat out of me the idea that a double kill was okay.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because it's one of those.
Yeah. Don't do it with blades.
Yeah, as long as I touched her first, I was not caring if she touched me. She goes, "Yeah, you can't get away with that. You have to get in with enough skill and enough of an edge to also get out." And that's so freaking obvious. It's one thing we'd never plan a tactical mission without an exfiltration plan, without a way to get out. We would never consider that. It'd be stupid. But I was doing it in sword sparring all the time.
Wow. Yeah. That makes a certain kind of sense because, it's like mountaineering. There's no successful ascent without a successful descent, but everyone focuses on getting to the top of the hill.
Yeah. It's not enough. It's more important not to get cut than it is to cut the other person. Yeah.
And the only reason you're cutting the other person in the first place is to stop them trying to cut you.
Yeah. And especially in a world where an infection can kill you, you have to get out as much as possible unscathed. And going back to the other thing, this is the thing where the sparring in self-defense, and I'm not saying don't spar when you're thinking self-defense, but don't take the assumptions or the expectations. Because if we're sparring, you're going to be in front of me. We've agreed what to do or what's allowed and what isn't. We'll have equivalent weapons. There might be weight classes, but we have all these variables under control. When it's self-defense, generally you aren't having your best day. You're injured or you're weak for some reason. You're distracted. The other guy has no interest in being fair. You mentioned full resistance, and sparring is one place where we work against full resistance, and that's one of the things I always glitch on, because generally in an attack, the person's not resisting; they're assaulting, and
sure.
The difference between someone trying to stop you from throwing them or locking them and hitting them, and someone who doesn't give a shit because they're pretty certain if they hit you hard enough and fast enough, you won't be able to do anything, is a huge qualitative difference that most people have never experienced. And one of the things within training, anything that's intense feels more real. Sparring at whatever level you do it is usually the most intense thing in your art. So you assume it's more real. And when you get the notch beyond that, it's actually not that closely related. So sparring is fun. It's important. But the crossover to fighting, if you want to get in bar balls, yeah, that's there. But for self-defense, you get someone who outweighs you. One of my friends, she's a woman, and her thing is my average opponent is twice my size, 3 times my strength, and he gets the first move from behind when I'm not ready.
Okay. So what is the best tool for training that? Sparring, clearly not, but.
Well, and sparring's not bad and it's fun, but probably the most effective is scenario training.
Okay.
You set it up, and scenario training has to be done super carefully. It has to be done very well or not at all. But they have to have enough clues to see it coming if that's what the bad guy would do, if there's an interview, so that they can handle it at that stage. The bad guy has to be armored to the point that you can unload all the way, because otherwise you're developing a habit of not unloading. And you get to work those things from surprise and being stunned and getting hit. So I think that's the closest, but even that, and this is one of those, everyone wants an answer. They want, this is the best way, but it's a lot like having kids. I don't care how many classes you took or how many books you read, you are not ready for having kids the first time.
That is so true.
And yeah, and same, no matter how hard you trained or how much, your first time you get ambushed, you get assaulted, you get hit over the back of the head. It's different. And I think a lot of us, we just have to accept, but also accept that we're animals. We're good at this. Our ancestors have survived way worse shit. And just because there's no way to train for it exactly doesn't mean there's no way to survive it, because we were surviving stuff like this for tens of thousands of years before training was even invented.
Yeah, that's a fair point. And we have these sort of inbuilt biological responses to things that allow us to be much stronger than usual and faster than usual. And, we can run much, much longer and much faster when we're totally terrified.
Yeah. But you're also more clumsy when we were terrified. So the part in the horror movies where the woman's running away and then she trips and falls, that is really realistic.
Yeah. Yeah, actually one training thing I remember on this knife course I was on, we did an exercise where you'd look at a point on the floor and spin round and round and round and round till you got really dizzy.
Yeah.
And then work from there.
Yeah, dizziness.
Right? So you're
replicate a concussion.
Yeah, so you're kind of staggering about, and it's difficult, and you still have to deal with the stuff that's coming at you when, your body isn't working properly, and yeah. So most of the listeners are sword people, and you have mentioned fencing and swords and what have you. So, do you have any actual sword practice
currently?
Yeah.
Currently, when the weather's nice, my wife and I go on the deck and grab a couple of cold steel wasters and smack at each other.
That's the way to stay married for 30 odd years, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, she's still pretty frisky.
Okay. And so now your principles-based instruction, is a fascinating book, basically about, well, you said earlier that a lot of people who say they're teaching principles can't actually explicitly describe the principles they're talking about.
Yeah.
But what would you say the primary differences would be between teaching self-defense and maybe teaching a historical martial art?
The primary difference is when you're teaching self-defense, you're teaching a student. When you're teaching a historical martial art or any martial art, you're teaching subject matter. And so it's one of those, when I'm teaching jiu-jitsu, there's this information that's been handed down for a very long time. It has to be handed down the same way because that's what defines the art. When I'm teaching self-defense, it's like every student's going to be targeted for different things. They have different resources that they bring to the table. And I have to do everything in my power to maximize their resources and get them to fit the situations that they're likely to face.
Okay. Now, I would sort of agree for the first while, but then there comes a point where the student basically knows in teaching historical martial art, the student basically knows the material and understands where it comes from and knows that anything they do differently is sort of departing from the text. But still, once they get to a certain, not terribly advanced level, it's necessary to train them to fight, because what we're really trying to do is recreate duelists who are never actually going to duel.
But again, it's within the venue. Another way to phrase it is teaching a martial art, I'm teaching people to fight and win. Teaching self-defense, I'm teaching people to cheat and survive.
Okay, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Now, Meditations on Violence is one of my absolute favorite books, and
cool.
without question, if I have a top 10 books every martial artist should read, it is in the top 5 of that top 10.
Wow.
Right? It is it's because
what are you going for?
You're trying to turn it around on me. No. I haven't finished my question. Funnily enough, actually, we have a mutual friend called Kaya Sadowski, and her book Fear is the Mind Killer would certainly be in the top 10 as well.
She's on my list too.
Yeah. And also, actually, listeners to the podcast, she's episode 5 of this podcast. So yes, you can go listen to that if you're interested, as you should be. So,
or I could just call her. But all right.
No, I was talking to the listeners, not to you. I know.
Oh,
you. Okay. You and Kai go way back. So, okay. In Meditations on Violence, at the beginning of the bibliography, you write, first off, read a damn book. Okay, and that's actually fairly unusual advice from someone teaching a super practical.
Why would that be unusual advice? It's
because you can't learn martial arts from reading a book, can you? Really?
But you can't. Yeah, but that doesn't mean you should not learn. And I do believe.
I know. I'm teaching.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, I teach martial arts from books that I've read. I mean, I'm the living in. I know.
I'm disturbed by the number of people that think that they can learn by watching videos. And I've come to the conclusion that when someone says I'm a visual learner, what they're really saying is I'm too lazy to work out.
Okay.
But there is some stuff that's kinesthetic. You have to feel it to really get it.
Absolutely. And also, but for representing movement, it's easier to teach a movement through video. I mean, I have books, and I've written books, and I've produced online courses, and for reproducing a movement is much easier for a student to reproduce it from seeing the video than from reading the book.
Yeah, it's really hard to describe movement in just words. Absolutely true. But reading, it's one of those that you should never stop learning. Just full stop. You should never stop learning. And reading is one of the most information dense ways we can get there. And most of what, for self-defense in particular, by the time it goes physical, you're so far behind the 8 ball that your odds are pretty low. We did the design of crime in Belgium.
Yes, we did.
Yeah, and how many people have anything that can survive the crimes that and none of you were actual professional criminals doing this forever. This is the first time. How would I take somebody out? And how many people had a solution for the crimes that you came up with?
Yeah. I mean, I played the victim for one group, and I was a little old lady, and they knocked on my door, and I opened the door, and that was that.
Yeah.
It was really, really nasty.
Right. And so most of the stuff that actually is going to help you is going to come in being able to understand how criminals think, to being able to recognize a setup before it happens.
Sure.
And you can learn a lot of that by reading and listening to podcasts and talking to people. And one of the ones that's on my list is a book called Inside the Criminal Mind. And the author, Samanow, there are a whole bunch of psychologists that work in prisons. And criminals practice manipulating them. They brag about this. They have contests about it. Samanow was one of the only ones I've ever known that realized he was being played. And that made him think about a lot of stuff and do a lot of research in ways. But he's the best description of how high-end criminals think. One of the reasons why I suggest that is there are a bunch of books written by criminals, and you have to be careful because take Soledad Brother or George Jackson's Prison Letters by George Jackson. He was a manipulative narcissist and a full-blown antisocial personality disorder. But unless you realize that he wrote those to manipulate you, he wrote his books to manipulate you, the reader. You are the target. It's really easy to fall for his bullshit. So that reading can really help you understand when you're being played.
Interesting. So why did you write Meditations on Violence?
I think we've talked about this, right?
Yeah.
2002.
But nobody got to listen because it was just the two of us. So
all right. So 2002 was a really, how much bad language can I use? Because it was a really fucked up year.
You can say whatever the fuck you want, mate.
Okay, cool. So we had we delivered a baby in reception that was addicted to crack and heroin. My first body recovery, search and rescue, friend committed suicide. And for the first time, things weren't settling. I've always been really psychologically robust. I never took the fights home. There are horrible, horrible things we saw. And they never affected me. But for the first time, this stuff was not, I shot somebody. That also had an issue. So this stuff was not getting out of my head. It was staying there for the first time in my life. And I got tired of thinking about it internally. So I started writing it down, and I just kind of vomited out all the stuff in my head. Because one of the other things there is that martial arts had always been the place I would go to get, my attitude adjustment. I go there, get slammed into the floor, get punched a lot, and I'd be happy, and all my perspective was that. And this one,
every martial artist understands what you just said, and every non-martial artist would be going, "Yo, what?"
Yeah, and it's so I was getting this, but it wasn't. I for the first time I was looking at my I hate using the word brother all the time. My martial arts brothers is like, you have no clue what you're fantasizing about. You do not want this. This is, because I'm, especially after, I'm waiting for the lawsuit to come through, all the stuff that's going to assumed was going to mess up my life. So the place where I normally did my psychological healing wasn't working for me. So I started writing, and originally I had no real intention to publish it. I figured, it would be my Makamono, my Densho. When I actually raised a jiu-jitsu student, a black belt, I would give them that. And that would be all the stuff that you really can't bring out in class. But when I got done with the first draft, I sent it to a couple of friends, just to kind of get a check. And one of them was Chris Wilder. And Chris sent it to the publisher.
Oh, really?
So, so it was supposed to be it was just a private little thing for me. And it's like, and Chris goes, "Yeah, I got it. It was on my email. I was talking to my publisher when it came in. Let's just send it on to him. I hope you don't mind."
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a really good friend or a really bad one, either way.
Yeah, it's changed my life. For better or worse, I don't know.
Okay, so I know you're big into books and you're big into reading, and as a writer, obviously you have to absorb maybe 200 books for every one you produce. But you actually tried to get me to describe my top 10 books every martial artist should read earlier. And I went with Meditations on Violence and Kaya's Fear is the Mind Killer. And of course, I have others, but I'd be very curious to hear what yours are.
I thought about this, and I don't know if I can throw it out that way.
Okay.
Because within martial arts, there's some, every different martial art has its own canon. And there are some little gems that, like, for years, and it still is. My favorite judo book was by Gay Bartlett in the UK called Judo and Self-Defense. And it was basically set up as this 100 lessons to get to black belt. It was back when there was almost no organization. It's so old that it was basically a book on how to set up a club in the UK to become a judo guy. But even when I was on the team, whenever I was having trouble with the technique, I would look in there, and he would have this little thing, points to watching connection with this throw, and it would almost exactly whatever problem I was having. It was just. So it's one of those, in the self-defense world, in the US at least, everyone should read Andrew Branca's Law of Self-Defense. It breaks
Law
down
and self-defense.
Okay. Yeah, the Law of Self-Defense. It's Kaya's on my list because it's about how to teach students. There's one conversation I want to have with her because one of the, and we've kind of had it online, but I think we really need to talk, because one of her things is that fear is more limiting than rules. And most of the people that I work with, fear is our primary motivator. It's not an enemy. It's a friend. It's something that we use. So that's a conversation, because one of the things she says in there is super powerful is you have to change your students' relationships with failure.
Yeah.
Right. Make failure challenges where you learn stuff. I also feel that the second step is you have to change their relationship to fear.
Yeah, it reminds me of Gavin De Becker's Gift of Fear, which would probably make my top 10.
Yeah, it's yes. I really like Gavin. I like everything except the last chapter. But if I'd saw my mom shot, I probably would have similar attitudes. So I have my list of 4 books everyone should read, martial artists or not.
Okay.
So that's The Richest Man in Babylon.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. Like a lot of kids who was raised poor, I have this really fucked up relationship with money and how money. That's the best book I've seen on how money actually works and what it really is. The Lakin's How to Get Control of Your Time and Your Life is the first. It's the time management book that all their time management books are based on.
Okay.
How to Win Friends and Influence People is just, everyone should read that. Everyone should have read that.
Yeah, I have it on my shelf and I have read it. I don't know. It didn't really chime with me, but maybe I just have no hope to win friends or influence anyone.
Well, even if you don't want to do it, it still shows the mechanism.
Sure.
And it's very, very powerful on the mechanism. And the other one, really unfortunate title, but it's called Think and Grow Rich.
Yeah, I've heard of it.
And that one, everyone that has followed the pattern in there has become incredibly successful.
Okay.
However they measure it. So, yeah.
Okay, so actually, there's quite a lot on there about sort of time management and money.
Yeah.
So just, if you don't mind, tell us about it. So how do you actually make a living?
Let's see. For a while, I was making a living by being a jail guard. Then I was making a living by being a contractor in Iraq. And then I was doing it by seminars and books. And that was the weirdest, because that's the first time I've not been in sworn service in my adult life.
That's a hard way to do it.
And that was, and it was, no, and it was scary. It was one of those, I'm betting my family's welfare on whether or not I can pull this off.
Right.
And and that worked. And, I've had a pension waiting for me since I left the sheriff's office. And I decided to draw on it at the start of this year, which since COVID would have sunk the seminar business, the timing was perfect. So I did 10 years on just writing and teaching. So I feel confident that I know how that works.
Yeah.
And now
it's a good solid base.
Yeah. Now it's pension and writing.
Okay. So you're actually making a living from your books. That's excellent. So what is the next book?
Almost. The one I'm in editing process, and you know how much I hate editing.
Yes.
And I've been talking about this. So the first draft of this has been done for almost 2 years now. But it's I'm calling it Glossary as the working title, but it's basically just a bunch of words and concepts that made life way easier to understand.
Okay.
They're words, concepts, but they're also tools. So like reframing. Once you realize that you don't necessarily have to answer the question if you can change the question. I don't have to solve the problem.
Yeah, you're quite good at that.
Problem. So reframe it. So reframing affordances. Once I understood affordances, a whole bunch of things clicked into place. That my ability to do something with something is controlled by how I see it. If I can change how I see it, I can change my ability to use it. Empiricism. It's and in some of these I found the word after, because I'd had this one of my best professors at college said is I don't care what you think. I don't care what's going on in your head. If it's not observable, it's not real. I only measure behaviors. And it's like, and that's been incredibly powerful for me.
And particularly in the self-defense world, that's super important. The motivations of the person are important up to the moment that the fight begins, because that helps you avoid it. But once it starts, it's you have to deal with the physical reality of their behavior, not your idea about how they might behave.
Well, and even before the build-up, most of the time what people say the reason that they're mad is not the reason they're mad.
Oh, sure.
Right. But if you can discern the real reason they're mad, you can solve that and they won't even know it. And it's a form of reframing.
Now, okay, the build-up, we sort of stumbled onto the topic of the build-up to violence. And actually one of I have a Patreon that supports this podcast, and one of the patrons asked me to ask you about the effect of culture on the build-up to violence and the exact form that the eventual violence may take. Go ahead.
Well, it's there's a lot of cultural things that goes into it, and one of the models I use is social and asocial violence, right? Social violence, they're dealing with you as a person. Asocial violence, they're dealing with you as a resource or a toy. So one of the cultural things is if you've been raised that all people are people, your tendency is to be more social. Your violence, when you do use, is for communication. You're trying to teach them a lesson and control their behavior. When you've been trained or raised, and this was actually the default for most of history, that the idea that all people are people is fairly new. But if you've been raised that people that you aren't related to aren't real people, then you can use a much higher level of force with a lot less emotional repercussions and with a lot less hesitation. So that's one of the things that's one of the studies I ran into said that the child soldiers don't have PTSD.
Wow.
Because they aren't killing people, they're killing other members of tribes that don't belong to them. But when they get adopted and re-socialized, they get the PTSD retroactively.
Oh my God, that's so horrific.
It's horrific, but it's one of those so socially you can raise a kid to believe almost anything you can imagine about violence in a certain context. You can teach them that if it doesn't have an element of violence, it's not real love, and you see that all the time. So that's part of it. The other part is that and this is two ways. In a stable, law and order society, we have expectations that violence is not going to happen. When that goes away, violence becomes a natural way to solve problems. It's always been a natural way to solve problems.
Sure.
We don't realize how artificial our society is, and artificial doesn't mean bad in this context. Most of the things we think of as good are unnatural because the natural default is lazy.
Sure.
In a natural might make right
is natural, but it's horrible and disgusting and stupid.
Right.
But it's still natural.
Right.
Rape is natural, but it's abhorrent and should never happen. But it's natural.
Yeah.
People who are not socialized not to do it will end up doing it, and it's prevalent in every culture.
One of the things that in Kaya's book is consent is super important, but consent doesn't exist in nature. It's a human construct.
Right.
And it's a good human construct. I like it. But so within that, we have a tendency, and this goes into, violence for writers, that idea. We live in a very rarefied artificial bubble, and it becomes really weird when we start extrapolating that to other cultures, other eras. So the social thing there is very, very cultural. There tend to be similar steps within the group, because you don't want to kill people within your own group. You don't want to weaken them, and you don't want to weaken your group, and you don't want them so pissed off that they leave. So there tends to be a ritual combat within groups that's not lethal. But there's a huge argument that the reason for the lethal dueling in the 17th centuries and 18th century in Europe was because there were just too many sons to divide the land. And they needed to kill off a lot of the nobility, or else there'd be too many petty nobles running around.
Okay, that's an interesting theory. Where did that come from?
I'm trying to remember. I read a lot of books. I want to say it was Baylor's book on the duel, which I don't know if it's any good or historically accurate, but it's super fun. But I read a lot of books about the same time about the same subject. So but I think there was one thing, 10% a year were dying. And that's why they started outlawing it.
The duel has been, the private duel has been illegal pretty much forever. Mm-hmm. The kind of the public duel, like a judicial combat type duel, was legal in most parts of Europe in some form or another until about the middle of the 16th century. Mm-hmm. And then even that became outlawed. And one of the reasons, the duelists were always of the upper classes. Mm-hmm. And although it was illegal, it was tolerated. And even the last duel fought in Scotland, mm-hmm. In the 19th century, the same judge who that morning had sent a little girl to Australia for, I think, 7 years for shoplifting, pardoned or acquitted the surviving duelist because it was understood that it was a duel between gentlemen and that's okay. Even though it's technically murder, he got off.
Privilege,
right? So it's been illegal in most of Europe, but it's always been sort of tolerated, and the consequences haven't. The consequences have been there but not applied. But sometimes there's like you're banished from the city for a year or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's a really strange social phenomenon.
Is it strange, or does it just look strange from our point of view?
Well, I mean, strangeness is a subjective value judgment. So yeah, from our point of view, certainly. Of course, if you're in the middle of it, it feels natural and normal.
I try to think the historical perspective. Has there been dueling longer than there's been not dueling?
There's been dueling a lot longer. Yeah. So we're the ones that are weird. Okay, historically speaking, I suppose you're right. Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay, so all right, this is a question I ask everyone, and I'll be very curious to see how you respond. So, what is the best idea you haven't acted on?
I don't know if it's the best, but I get these ideas every so often. And one of those is, are you familiar with Snickers bars?
Of course, yep.
Okay, so take out the peanuts, substitute coffee beans, and sell them on college campuses.
Oh my God, you sir are a genius.
Right? So
yeah,
I have no idea how to act on that, but I think that would do great. So,
and do you know, I was not expecting that answer.
Well, and the other weird idea I had is I want an app called I Sacrifice. And so you get out your phone, you plug in the app, and then you type in what you want, like I want good traffic to go to work, and then you decide what you're going to sacrifice and how you're going to do it. So it's like I want good traffic for work, and I'm going to sacrifice a pigeon with a stone knife. And the app sacrifices the pigeon and plays mysterious music and says the gods will grant your wish if that's what they want.
Okay.
I think people would obsessively play with this app.
I think they absolutely would. And yeah, both of those are totally doable.
Right. I just don't know how. So.
Okay. Well, if anybody listening to this knows how, please do get in touch. And
yeah,
because we could make millions, sir.
Wouldn't that be fun?
You could make millions. Well, it would be super fun.
I don't care. Like I said, someone else is doing all. I just get weird ideas sometimes.
Yeah. So in the app, there's like lots of different ways to sacrifice different things.
Yeah.
So like, okay.
Well, and I want the to be a human sacrifice where you can sacrifice your own Facebook profile.
Oh, wow. And it would really go.
Right? Wouldn't that be cool?
You know, I have been trying to get rid of my Facebook profile since forever. And every time I'm just about to delete it, some critical work thing comes up that I could only do with a Facebook profile. And I'm like, fuck, I was so close.
I planned when I retired, which would be when I got back from the sailboat, to throw a big party and delete it. But we now have the Kiron training group on there, and we do our chats, and it's
right.
Like, fuck.
Well, okay.
Yeah.
We have a Facebook group for my online students, and I've now started a Discord server thing instead. And that is, I will actually go to that every day and like chat to people or you know, people ask questions about training or swords or whatever. And it's fine because it isn't Facebook. So it doesn't have all of that stuff to kind of suck you into ghastly, you know, time sucks and you know, angst and misery and adverts and oh God.
If you want to, my attitude right now, and this has been really helpful. I'm now looking at Facebook as, oh my God, this is monkeys flinging poo.
That is super helpful.
Everything just shifts into perspective.
In fact, the only thing I'm on Facebook for at the moment is Maya Soderholm has a kind of private Facebook group discussing martial arts things, and so I go to that, but you know, people are using like companies. I bought a course to help me be better at my self-publishing side of things, and their entire kind of support structure is on Facebook. And to my mind, that's it's kind of lazy and unfair. Like, you know, if you sell somebody something, you should be there to kind of help them solve problems with it if things come up, right? And the one time some bit of the course wasn't working properly, so I sent their support email a support request, and was told, why don't you ask it on the Facebook group? It's like, I don't want to know what other students and your customers think about solving this problem. I want you to solve this problem for me.
Yeah.
Because I've just paid you like $500. You know, I'm entitled to a little bit of actual support, I would have thought. But no, it's like, just chuck it all onto Facebook and, you know, let the poo flinging monkeys help each other. It's like, that to me is not, yeah. It leaves a bad taste. But the Discord app's great.
Everything about Facebook leaves a bad taste for me. It's
Yeah.
The number of my friends that evidently, if they're hiding behind keyboards, are genocidal monsters. I don't know.
It's scary, isn't it? And just think of it as founding DNA. It was created as an app for college boys to rate girls on their hotness.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And I think that has kind of, tainted its growth ever since.
Yeah, maybe. It's just so much about people is about getting excited and angry and afraid right now. They're so emotional.
Right. Well, I mean, it's the business model, right? Mm-hmm. They sell advertising. That's how they make their money. And so getting you angry keeps your attention, making you happy, you get happy and then you go away.
Yeah, right?
So
Absolutely.
there's a wonderful book on it by Jaron Lanier called 10 Arguments for Deleting Your Social Media Accounts Right Now, which is, it's well worth a look because it kind of lays out the fundamental problems Facebook and Twitter and what have you. It's why I switched from YouTube to Vimeo, because with YouTube, it's free. And so I am providing content to suck people onto YouTube so that YouTube can serve up ads to sell people stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
It's
Whereas
amazing.
on Vimeo.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it works. But on Vimeo, I pay Vimeo for the privilege of hosting my videos. So I am the customer. Mm-hmm. And when Vimeo doesn't care whether I bring people onto my videos or not, because that's not what they're getting paid to do. They're getting paid to provide a really good video hosting service, and that's what they do.
Right.
So I'm much happier.
Product.
Exactly. And with things like that, I would much rather be the customer. Okay. We are running a little over time. Thank you for your patience.
That happens. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. So let me just wrap things up by asking if there's anything you would like to suggest to or ask of the listeners.
The same thing I always say, get off your ass and actually do stuff. It's, go play hard, live hard. I think that's my generic advice, except for, shoot the one on the left, hit the one on the right and keep moving, which is my other generic.
Okay. Get off your ass and actually do stuff. I think that's an excellent place to finish. Thank you so much for talking to me today, Rory. That was great.
It's good talking to you again. It's been a long time.
Thanks for listening. You can find the episode show notes at swordschool.com/podcast, where you will find transcriptions, photos, videos, and links for this episode. You can find a direct link to the show notes for this episode in the description. Join us next week for another cracking conversation. See you then.